I'm lucky enough to work with men and women alike who are raising children, who share the responsibility, who feel, I don't want to say the burden, but the responsibility and the pressure of needing to be there, needing to fulfill all those responsibilities, organize, coordinate schedules, share transportation schedules, lunch schedules, school schedules, all of these things. So I see it sort of across the board.
Hi, Elevators. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Christina Romero, coach here at WP Elevation. And on this episode of the podcast, I had the pleasure of speaking with Lisa Sabin Wilson, co-founder at WebDev Studios, an all-around WordPress expert. She talks to me about the challenges of starting a business remotely and building a remote team, as well as the future of WordPress and what kind of things we should look out for. So stay tuned.
This is the WP Elevation Podcast, helping WordPress consultants elevate.
Hey, this episode of the WP Elevation Podcast is brought to you by WP Elevation. Well, more specifically, it's brought to you by a bunch of our happy customers. See, frankly, I feel a little bit awkward telling you how great WP Elevation is because you're probably not going to believe me because WP Elevation is my baby. It's something that we started over 3 years ago. Of course, now we're a team of coaches and mentors, and we have hundreds, and by the time you're listening to this, probably thousands of members all over the world. But it still really is something that I'm very passionate about. And of course, if you join WP Elevation, we make revenue and we make profit. So it's a little bit awkward if I tell you how great it is, because you probably think I'm just trying to sell you on it. And partially I am, because I know how beneficial the program is. So what I'd love to do instead is just introduce you to some of our customers. So if you go to wpelevation.com/thepodcast, all one word, you'll be able to hear some of those stories from our customers and hear for yourself how WP Elevation has impacted their business and changed their lives. I hope you enjoy that, and I hope you check it out at some point. Right now, let's get back to the podcast.
Hi everyone, Christina here, and I'm joined by Lisa Sabin Wilson. If you don't know her name or her face, you're probably very new to WordPress, but she is partnered at WebDev Studios, has written tons of books on WordPress, and is a frequent speaker at WordCamp. So thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thanks, Christina, for having me.
Yes, and I actually just rewatched your original podcast with Troy over 3 years ago, which seems insane. And
yeah, it seems like it was just last year even.
No, I know, and it's true. We've grown the program itself pretty quickly. That I was surprised by that. But in that podcast, we're fortunate to know a lot about you. Is anything changed in the last 3 years, or any new developments?
Well, probably. Let's see. 3 years ago, it would have been like 2014. I was about a year into my partnership at WebDev Studios. So now it's 2017, and I've been around WebDev for a while now. And, back then I might have even said in my podcast that joining and partnering up with WebDev Studios was one of the best decisions professionally and personally that I could have made. And now 4 years later, I still feel the same way.
Good. I was going to hope there would not be lots of podcasts if you're like, and I regret it.
On this podcast, no.
You're like, this is the moment where I'm coming out and saying, I regret it. No.
No, it's really good. I mean, I joined WebDev after 10 years of freelancing with design and development. And I said back then, and I still maintain that I don't regret the decision, and I'm really happy that I made the decision to partner up and team up with some of the brightest minds in the community.
Seriously. I mean, like I said, if people don't know their names, they obviously have been around WordPress a long time, but are you still in Wisconsin? Like, are you still doing it fully remote?
Yeah, we are still fully remote. I'm in Wisconsin. I think when I did the podcast, I lived in Milwaukee, but last year we moved further north up into Green Bay.
Closer to the Green Bay Packers, clearly. Yes.
Green Bay Packers. Anybody who follows me on Twitter or knows me knows that I have a passion for football, and Green Bay Packers is my team.
Well,
so,
we're Packers fans here too, all the way from Maryland, which is odd, but
fantastic.
Well, that's good. Well, and working remote, has there been challenges? And because I have to say, growing a business remotely with Troy is very difficult. I mean, growing a business remotely, not kind of being in the same room every day. Do you kind of keep your chat going? I mean, what's some challenges from building a business? Because, I mean, web dev is huge. I mean, you've built a really amazing business, completely remote.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I mean, remote work has its challenges for sure, and communication is probably the number one challenge that most companies who work remotely, have and face and have to tackle every day. So thankfully, there are a lot of really dynamic and fantastic tools that are available to us. In the early days of WebDev, we used IRC as like our company chat room. Then we moved to HipChat, and most recently, like within the last year and a half, we moved to Slack.
Right.
And that's just kind of our ongoing everyday communication. We use Slack for, we've got different channels for the different projects that we have, and different departments of the company and things like that. And it's really a valuable tool.
I find Slack to be magical. I find it to just be magical. Like, what are some, do you have like random Slack channels that you guys have? Like anything, what are some of the channels?
We have a WDS parenting channel where we've got the parents, people who have kids, and we have a WDS homeowners channel where people who own homes or, are doing like home improvement projects or whatever, share some stuff. We have a WDS healthy channel. We have a bunch of people in the company who wear Fitbits, and we're all on Fitbit.com. We've got a WebDev Studios Fitbit account, and we do challenges, and we do a weekly workday challenge and then a weekend warrior challenge. And we just kind of share what we're doing to kind of encourage a healthy lifestyle, because I think when you're working remote, it's so easy, and you probably know this, that it's so easy to just sit on your butt behind your computer 10 hours a day or more in some cases. And you get so focused, and you're in this work bubble that you don't even realize that you've been sitting for like the last 8 hours doing work, coding, designing, whatever it is you're doing. It's important to get up and move. And I think working remotely, especially in tech, it's important to have those reminders. So we try to encourage and foster self-care at WebDev.
I love that. And I love your channels. You've inspired me. And I consider them like water cooler channels. They're like the most random things you talk about, like maybe a Game of Thrones channel. I maybe need that in my Slack or something like that when that starts again.
We have a gaming channel for those who are, into games. And
I love that. And it's true. And I have to say, it's different challenges working from home as a parent. We almost have enough parents in our Slack. We're almost there. Everyone kind of needs to catch up, but I feel a little alone sometimes with the parenting. I love that idea, like just to unload and vent.
The parenting channel is great because and I'm speaking from a parent perspective as well, like when you're working from home, and I've been working remotely now for 15 years, your kids and having to manage your kids while you're at home is difficult because they see you at home and they think, Mom is just accessible to me all the time, and I can just run in during a video podcast and ask for lunch or ask to go out and play. So you have to learn how to set those boundaries, and it's challenging.
That's a really good segue into one of the things I wanted to talk about, because I just read an article recently, and it kind of touches upon how when you're a woman and you run your own business and you run it from home, there's chances where your partner is sharing chores with you, but as a mom, you still have a mind load, like the things you're thinking about to like keep everything running smoothly. Would you say that there's like an extra pressure as a woman owning your own business, especially running it from home with a family, that there's just like some extra pressures there that maybe the men don't really feel, like in the whole work home life balance and raising a family?
Quite possibly. I mean, from my perspective, I've been a single mom for many years now. I have a husband now, but for a lot of years when my children were a lot younger and through their teen years, I was a single mom. So from my perspective, yes, because I didn't have a partner to share the load. It was just everything was me, and I was still running my own business on top of that. I have a son who has a daughter, and he's a single father. So that perspective is different as well because he's fulfilling both roles. I think parents in general these days have that load. I'm lucky enough to work with men and women alike who are raising children, who share the responsibility, who feel, I don't want to say the burden, but the responsibility and the pressure of needing to be there, needing to fulfill all those responsibilities, organize, coordinate schedules, share transportation schedules, lunch schedules, school schedules, all of these things. So I see it sort of across the board. Mothers in general, I mean, I think mothers just naturally, the natural tendency is to just kind of pick up all of those little things that maybe my husband's not thinking about today, or something like that. But just the pressure in general for parents is real.
Yeah. It is. It's so good that you say that too, because it is true. We have a lot of guys in our program too who are a lot of single fathers running their business and raising their kids. And I even started like a mompreneurs group, and they were like, "Can we come in?" And I was, because they're like, "We need this support too." And it is. I mean, I think it is challenging. And one thing I wanted to bring up too and speak to more is, the whole community of WordPress. I mean, we see a lot of male stars. We see a lot of these guys like rocking it with their businesses. Troy started WP Elevation, and then, a lot of us coaches have come along, kind of filled out some of the female presence of it and brought it, I think, a different conversation forward. I think as women, I think we tend to sometimes bring, I've noticed, at least on our end, granted, a lot of men have done this too, but like bringing a little bit more of the work-life balance conversation forward, maybe a little bit more of the mental health conversation forward. Women tend to maybe feel more comfortable talking about those things. So, I mean, do you find a difference? I mean, you're very present in the WordPress space. You're a female business owner. Do you see any differences there? Any challenges that have been unique? Over 50% of our membership is actually women. We actually have more women in our program than we do men, which is so shocking and surprising because you just think tech world and you think dominated by the men, but that's not the case in what we see with these WordPress small agencies. So, I mean, any thoughts along there? Any like challenges you've kind of noticed or had to overcome, or anything personally that you've had to kind of, reset your mind in terms of like how you've attacked things in business?
Yes and no. I mean, I think that in terms of going back to what you had said about conversations around mental health, I think we're seeing a lot more of that lately. And I think it's a difficult topic to discuss and a difficult topic to wrap people's heads around because of the stigmas that are attached to mental health. And I don't know that women are more comfortable discussing it than men are. Women do tend to be a bit more emotionally in touch. So perhaps, that provides an advantage. But you've got people like Corey Miller, who is a man, and he is a wonderful, wonderful person in the community. And he has really been doing a lot to bring forward those discussions and topics of mental health. And, I think the more that people see folks who are leaders in the community like that really opening up and talking about it, it encourages people to be able to talk about it. I know at WebDev, we've got, our own Slack channel where we talk about, we try to stay in touch with what can help in our agency and in our own WebDev community to really take care of and at least acknowledge and understand the struggles that people go through. Because when you're working, when you're speaking at a conference, when you're promoting things on Twitter or doing whatever to fulfill your job roles, you understand that there's a human behind that. I write books on WordPress, but I also have my own struggles here at home as well, and I think when you are, working with people like that, it's important to understand that there's this whole piece of them, not just the code that they're laying down or the designs that they're doing or things like that. But I'm really encouraged by the conversations I'm seeing in the community around mental health.
And oddly, I think WordPress lends itself to that as a community because of it being open source, because of it being very contributor driven, it has sort of formed like a support system of people. Like it's not as competitive as maybe other markets are. At least we've found, like everyone is almost more supportive. So I actually did interview Corey Miller on our podcast and he talked about mental health. Nice. Yes. And it's just so encouraging. And so we've seen opening up in our community, and then even just like what you feel when you go to WordCamps, it's just so unique and it's really special. And you have to think that goes back to like how WordPress was made, how it continues.
Yeah,
You know,
I think this community really fosters that openness. I mean, WordPress, just the community in general, really embraces holistic human beings as a person, as a whole, not just as a function or a feature or things like that. We have a gal at WebDev Studios. She's a developer. Her name is Allison Tarr. She's from Canada, and she has been speaking at WordCamps lately around mental health and how to care and feed your developer, things that you need to think about. Because it's so easy, even from my perspective as an agency owner, like it's so easy to be, I guess, so grateful for the work that they do with development, and there's always more to be done and more to be done and more to be done. And just because they're able to perform it and they're able to do it, and these are people that will just sit up all night and code, it's easy for somebody like me to just let them do that. So you have to be mindful that you're not, abusing the person, and you're making sure that the people that you work with, your team members, are taking care of themselves. That's why we have such a, push at WebDev for work-life balance and, healthy lifestyles, at least encouraging it to get people to think about it.
Yeah. And that's really neat because, I think where a lot of our members are now is they're starting to realize, wow, I can bring a team on, I can hire someone, and then you begin to get off the tools a little bit more and have a developer and have a designer and have an assistant and then have a second developer. And like you said, you begin to forget maybe some of the rules that you live by for yourself and having to manage the team. How big is the team at WebDev now? How many do you have?
I think we're at 42 now.
That's great.
Yeah.
And they're all remote, basically, or is there like a center office?
No, they're all remote. We don't have a break.
That's amazing. Do you get together for like a company?
We do once a year. At least once a year, we do what we call our WDS camp, where we fly everybody into a central location and we kind of hang out, at a resort. I think once we rented a house on Airbnb, and we do that for about a week, and we just hang out and spend time together, cook meals, share time. It's wonderful.
That's awesome.
It's really great to be able to do that, and I love the collaboration and creativity that comes out of being together in person. It almost feels like we can get so much more done when we're together and in person. But I think we do a really good job of coordinating that remotely too. But I love the opportunities that I get to be able to spend time with the team face to face.
That is really cool. And Slack makes it, I think, easier to have better conversations with people throughout the day, which is nice with the different channels. But I agree. When collaboration and ideas work really well when we're in the same room, and then we can actually implement and get stuff done remotely just fine. And that's sort of the draw, right? Like you said, you were a single mom. I'm a mom of 3 small kids. The draw is working from home. The draw is being able to do it remote. That's why we do what we do, And so you want to foster that in terms of growing the company. And it looks like you guys have just blown it out of the water. So that's pretty amazing.
Well, we're hoping, we improve more and more, every day we learn new things and find new tools, and really just having open and collaborative conversations with our teams on what works best for them. Brad and I don't sit at WebDev and think we have all the answers on what works absolutely the best for remote teams. We get a lot of feedback from the people that work for us and try to adjust and implement accordingly.
That's nice. That's a really good point, to actually welcome and open feedback. Any latest things we should look on the roadmap for what WebDev is coming out? You guys have some great, amazing plugins you've developed and features out there. BadgeOS being one of them, which we use a lot. So any other things on the roadmap that you guys are working on we should keep an eye out for?
Yeah, we recently launched a products and plugins division called Pluginize, which is at pluginize.com. A lot of times we do probably about 80% of what we do at WebDev is client services. And the clients that come to us are so creative, and they bring these challenges to us and say, we want this to be built, and we want to use WordPress for it. A lot of times we're building things that for clients that are very, very specific to their needs and their content management or content curation needs. But occasionally we come across, a feature or functionality that we'll look at and go, this would be a really cool tool for a developer in WordPress to be able to utilize to do this. Or it would be really cool for a user to be able to have this in their dashboard, to be able to control their content. And so, we look at everything that we do for clients and try to turn those into tools for community developers, users, whatever we can. And we release a fair amount of them for free. We have CPT UI, which is a plugin that really helps you. It gives an interface to the creation of custom post types in WordPress. That's been an incredibly popular plugin with over 1 million downloads on it. And we recently released a CPT UI extended, which has a few more features and support available for it. So we continue to do those things. But like I said, about 80% of what we do is client services. So we're building websites, building features and functionalities for clients, doing a lot of content migration off other platforms onto WordPress. So that's always exciting. I always love to be able to take a site that's done in like a proprietary CMS or some other content management system and bring it into WordPress, because I feel like,
like freeing them from the shackles of proprietary CMS.
You're free. That's one of the greatest things about working with these clients who have never worked with WordPress before and introducing them to really the independence and autonomy that it brings to their teams to be able to manage and curate their own content.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, you've been in this for a while now with WordPress. Where do you see WordPress going? I mean, it's a loaded question. It's a big question, but where do you see WordPress going from here?
To the moon. No. WordPress has come a long way. I've worked with WordPress since 2003, which is pretty much its inception. And we've seen a lot of ups and downs and mostly ups with WordPress. But right now, WordPress has got a pretty significant market share, right? It's I don't even know what the number is anymore. You hear 25% of the internet. I've heard 30, I've heard 27. I don't really know where it lands. It's there, and it's extremely significant, the reach of WordPress. As things have evolved on the web and technologies, and WordPress evolves along with it, I think the development team with WordPress has done a really good job with evolving WordPress, particularly around the REST API, which enables apps powered by JavaScript to run on the platform. And last year, one of Matt's biggest pushes was learn JavaScript deeply. And he even said that at the State of the Word, that, he believed that JavaScript and API-driven interfaces are the future of WordPress, but not just WordPress, but also of the web. So obviously, I think it's important that we're seeing the leadership of WordPress really pushing that forward. So I think you see it moving in that direction of really API-driven interfaces pushing WordPress development and web development just kind of as a whole. And then overall, I think that, you just see WordPress moving into more of a unified, streamlined interface. You've got Squarespace, which has become a big competitor, Wix, you've got a bunch of, platforms like that really are streamlined, sort of unified interfaces. So there's that, and I think WooCommerce, the acquisition of WooCommerce by Automatic, says a lot for the direction that WordPress is headed in the e-commerce space. I know at WebDev we're doing some pretty significant e-commerce work with WooCommerce, particularly in the last year and a half. So I think you start seeing more easily integrated options with e-commerce around Woo and WordPress. So
that's awesome. Perfect. You have so much knowledge that I'm like, and then that's the future. So and now we all know. We are caught up.
Stop asking the question. Please answer.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for coming on the podcast and sharing with us today. And if someone wanted to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
At WebDevStudios.com. That's pretty much where I exist. I'm on Twitter at Lisa Sabin Wilson.
Perfect.
As well.
Yeah, we'll tweet you. All right. Well, thanks so much, and have a great, year. Now we'll speak to you in 3 more years.
Hopefully it won't be that long,
Yeah, right.
but thanks a lot.
All right, take care. I just want to thank Lisa Sabin Wilson for joining us on the podcast and taking some time out of her very busy schedule to speak with us about those things. And I'm going to take her advice on those different Slack channels and add some more variety to my team. So I will be doing that. And I hope you do the same. So take advantage of that if you are building your own team remotely, or also her tips on where WordPress is going. Take some action there and go elevate.